Yes, good evening, everyone. This is Neeraj this side. Today, we all have gathered to understand some perspective on smart way of performing internal audit in a digital environment using advanced analytics, robotics, and how organizations can be resilient while facing evolving business models. Uh, so for this discussion today, we have our panelists, Mr. Siddeshwar Bhalla, Mr. Kaushik Saha, and Mr. Snehal Shah from Mazars, India. A quick introduction, for our panelists. Mr. Siddeshwar Bhalla is a national leader, GRC practice of Mazars, India. He leads a strong team of professionals in domain of risk management. He's carried out many confidential projects, and he can be entrusted with such projects. Then we have Mr. Kaushik Saha, who is national leader analytics in Mazars, India. He has more than 15 years of experience in business consulting and specializations in business analytics. He has helped clients in their analytics journey at various stages of maturity. Previously, he was director in information management system and analytics practice at Deloitte, where he was responsible to build practice by business development delivery key engagements. Kaushik has also worked with various private and public sector clients from different industries such as financial services, telecom, pharma, retail, etc. Although his primary experience is in India, he has worked with multiple clients in US and Middle East as well. Then we have Mr. Snehal Shah, who is Director, Robotic Auditing and Shared Services, Mazars, India. He has more than 11 years of work experience, and his profile includes innovation, tech convergence, and developing niche robotic solutions for client and industry-specific needs, leading and managing OEM relationships in India and global for automation, leading Mazars India Robotics COE and global RPA projects. He is also involved in setting up of automation center of excellence for clients to cater India and global locations. He's also involved in robotic process automation projects, including pilots and large-scale enterprise-wide implementation across industries. So with this quick introduction, I will hand over the discussion to the panelists. Just one quick info to all our participants. All the question and answers will be taken up at the end of the session. So request all of you to put your questions, or any information that you need, which the panelists would be happy to take it up at the end of the session in the question and answer box. So that's it from my side. Mr. Siddeshwar Bhalla, Mr. Snehal, and Mr. Kaushik, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Neeraj, for the warm introduction, and welcome all the participants. It's indeed a pleasure to have an interaction with almost, I can see, once every 5 participants who have joined. And this is an interesting topic, internal audit in digital environment. If you look at internal audit, it has been a age-old profession. I would say more than a 3-digit or a 4-digit, if you want to just compare a number of years, that old. But when we talk about internal audit in a digital environment, I think that's what we are in present, and that's what the future will look to be. So the next 2 hours, we want to actually engage with all of you and share the perspective on how in today's times the internal audit is being done in a very different way. So I will not say that we are not talking about risk over here, we are not talking about control, we are talking about all those things. And at the same time, there is an impetus on process automation on the business side. Now, how do we actually digitize or automate the audit part of it? And not only the audit, it's to do with the other control frameworks that we have, IFC, internal control, SOX, whether it's a JSOX or a US SOX or a Canadian SOX, all of these, how these can be actually done in a digital environment. So Snehal, since you are keeping a tab on these slides, can we go to the next one, please? Thanks. So the format of this presentation, so I'm going to give you a brief in terms of, let me put it this way, what is the ask from the internal auditors, particularly by the board of directors, by the audit committee. I'm going to structure around that initially, and then we'll talk about the internal control value chain. we'll quickly deep dive from there into the robotic audit. We are going to share some demos as well. We'll share some demos which has been made by Mazars, and though it has to be customized based on the client requirements, so it's not a single fit which will fit everyone, all the organizations. It has to be customized. And when we talk about data, it's actually big data. And so we've got Kaushik there with us. Robotics will be taken by Snehal, and we've got Kaushik, who's the national leader for analytics. So we're going to talk about advanced analytics. And I'm sure the question that will come in most of your mind is that what's the difference between advanced analytics or analytics and robotics? So we will be answering somewhere in the presentation those things as well. So let us see, but we'll definitely be having a good session around the questions and answers with all of you. Yes, Nehal. So as I said, we go to the next slide, Snail. So as I said, the question that is asked by the internal auditors is, or the corporate doctors, actually I want to call them as the corporate doctors, is everything okay? Is everything fine? Now this one line, a couple of words, that is everything okay, is everything fine, engulfs a lot of things. Now, what is there in the minds of the board of directors and audit committee members, in the minds of the management, the top leadership that is there? They know that there is a organization that they have established. There are vision and mission. They have some sort of objectives to achieve, and to fulfill that, there is what we call as a people, process, and platform. Yeah, so we've got people, the organization structure, we've got processes, systems and processes which are there, and the ERPs which are our platform. So these are the mechanisms which the people, or the at the helm, the board of directors have laid down, yeah, so that the corporations are controlled and directed. So that is what is corporate governance. That's actually what is talked about in corporate governance. And then there is a tone from the top management. Is everything going in an ethical way or not? And there are systems and procedures that are established so that all is going in a very in a way which is envisaged in the best. So Snail, you can have all the animation done. Yeah. So the tone from top management is particularly important because it sets an example for all others in and around the organization to follow. But is it enough just to have the people, process, and platforms in place and a tone? Obviously, there has to be some checks and balances which have to come while at an activity level or at an entity level also, the transactions are happening. What sort of control mechanism is in place? So we want to talk about two sides of the coin, which is control as well as risk. So wherever there is a risk or what can go wrong, there's a control also on the same side. But the bigger picture, the question that is to be answered is that from an overall governance angle in an organization, is everything going fine? Is everything going smooth, stable? Very difficult to answer this question. But what should go in the mind of an auditor, internal auditor specifically, is something that we are going to dwell in the subsequent slides. Yes, Nehal. There are four pillars, if I can say, of these corporate governance. Yeah, and these four pillars, you have the audit committee, which is an extended arm of the board of directors, internal auditors, which have been given the responsibility to look at the internal control environment in an organization so that we can go and report back to the audit committee. The people, which is the executive management, and the external audit, the statutory audit. These are the four cornerstones, the pillars of effective, good corporate governance in any organization. And how an internal auditor actually seamlessly engages with all of these. We know there are internal stakeholders, there are external stakeholders, and the internal auditors actually have to have everything aligned. Why am I talking all this about is because it's not to talk just about internal audit, it's talked about in the digital environment, how the internal audit has to happen. The question which may come in the mind is, will a bot, a robot, which will do an audit, go and answer all those questions? No, it won't. Bot will only do what you ask the bot to do. But what can you ask the bot to do so that you have the best of the comfort to look at the complete holistic view in an organization and say, yes, with a reasonable extent of comfort, you can say things are okay or not okay that way. So those are the cornerstones of corporate governance. And we go to the next one, Snail. Yeah. I'll be just a bit quick on this because I know I don't want to hold on the anxiety of our participants to talk in detail about robotic audit. Now, we've talked about corporate governance. We've seen what sort of governance in an organization could be in the form of an org structure when we talk about board of directors, audit committees, executive management, internal and external auditors. But in India, how has the era of corporate governance over the last 2 decades, if I can say, and why I'm saying 2 decades is because I wanted to touch post our globalization, which was in 1991 in India. Though it is a far-fetched, I would say, in terms of the number of years that have lapsed, but I think there are a lot of learnings that all of us can take. If you just pause and look back, you'll find that almost 2 decades back, there were a lot of white papers that used to come periodically. So that it could be from the Confederation of Indian Industries, from Kumar Mangalam Birla Committee, various committees, Naresh Chandra Committee, Narayan Murthy Committee, and these white papers were more of recommendatory in nature. That what should a good governance, what should be in an organization, what should constitute a good governance, what should be audit committee composition, a board of director composition, should you need a risk management framework, and all those things. More of recommendatory. There was nothing mandatory. But over this period of the last 2 decades, if you see, there were some milestones which came up, and where the regulators also took a step forward and said that no, as far as the governance in an organization is concerned, we have recommendatory things, but we want to make certain things mandatory also at the same time. And it all started with I would say listed companies, and I'm bucketing here all companies into listed and unlisted companies. So in the year 2000, we had clause 49, and we all know, or most of us would know, that clause 49 was the most talked about in those times. In fact, I had almost started my career at that time with one of the larger firms, and I know that there was huge buzz in terms of how the listed companies are going to ensure compliance with clause 49. So clause 49 is when a company which is listed, then as per clause 49 of the listing agreement, there are 7 things which were specifically to be done from a corporate governance angle, though clause 49 talked about a lot of other things. Now, what was those 7 things? The board composition, audit committee composition. Does the organization have a legal compliance framework in place, a management information system in place or not? Does the organization have a code of conduct? Now, for prevention of insider trading, do you have a separate code of conduct or not? And specifically from an internal control point of view, at a transaction level, I would say we had the internal controls of a financial reporting framework. So the CEO or the CFO of an organization was supposed to give a certificate, which it gives till date also, that the internal controls of a financial reporting framework is in place. As time passed by, now we call it as a LODR, a listing obligation disclosure requirements, and it's again for listed companies. But there was another big milestone that came in the year 2013 when the Companies Act 2013 was introduced, and section 134, section 177, and section 143 specifically, if I can say, talked about what should be mandated under the law as part of corporate governance. And it specifically talked about internal financial controls. Now, there was one thing which was internal controls over financial reporting, which was for listed companies. Here you had IFC, which is internal financial controls, which is for listed as well as unlisted companies. I don't want to go into the technicalities of IFC here, but yes, for the listed companies, it was IFC, internal financial controls, and for unlisted companies, it is ICOFAR, which is internal controls over financial reporting. That means what used to be there for listed companies has moved for unlisted companies under the Companies Act 2013, and what was actually not there has come up in the form of internal financial control. As internal auditors, we look at internal control, that is the complete framework of internal control system that is there in the organization, which talks about risk and controls and entity level controls, functional level controls, all of it. Now, what's the difference? Subtly, I'll tell you. When you have controls to be seen for what is getting reported in the financials, which is your balance sheet and P&L, it is internal controls over financial reporting. And when you go into the operational areas of the business, whether it's procurement or a sales or a legal function or HR function, it's actually to do with internal financial controls. Yeah. The question that may come to your mind is that whatever is getting reported in the financials is actually to do everything under the sun, everything under in the organization. But for the purposes of understanding, we can say that if there is an invoice process, if there's an invoice that is getting processed, and there's a three-way match, which is like looking at the purchase order and invoice and a goods received note, that's called a three-way match. And if you look at an agreement, it becomes a four-way match. So that sort of a check that whatever is getting reported is correct or not is internal controls of financial reporting. But the purchase order, if it has a unit value of say 10 as an example, now should it be 10 or 9 or 8 is the efficiency of the procurement function, and that's what the internal financial control is. So the bar of governance, of corporate governance, actually got raised from a recommendatory mode, it became a mandatory mode. Now IFC also talked about fraud risk. It also talked about policies and procedures in an organization getting documented. And all of these things, as we look at BOT, as we particularly look at the analytics, Kosik is going to share in terms of what are the various fraud scenarios, how analytics can help, and obviously when you use a bot, how those things can be talked about. So when we talk about using bots in an internal control environment, specifically in an IFC, specifically in the SOX, these are the things which are going to get touched. Now, as time passed by, we had GST, which is goods and services tax. Now, goods and services tax, if you ask me, has also given some sort of elevation in the minds of people in an organization that we really need to have systems and procedures in place. Because if you do not have a purchase order, you do not have an invoice carrying a GST number, perhaps the input credit ratio that you, the input credit that you can avail of, you may not be able to take the benefit of it, and there would be reconciliation problems and all that stuff. So right from the point of master controls, whether it is to do with the sales side, whether it is to do with the procurement side, whether it is to do with the internal people side, all of these things have to get addressed at the very onset of getting on board a particular vendor or a customer. And then we had the Kotak committee, which has a recommendatory as well as mandatory things that have got highlighted. Specifically, if you look at the risk management framework, which was for top 100 companies, the Kotak committee has mandated that it should be for the top 500 companies which are there. So I think that's where the bar of governance is further getting raised, and that's what in terms of we spoke about corporate governance. We saw how the era of corporate governance in India has been, and as we go to the next slide, Snail, we'll also talk about some other aspects which are to do with the changing regulatory landscape, for instance. So today, an organization, when an internal auditor is looking at an organization, now the organization may be subjected to a lot of, I would say, regulations. Internal audit is just one of them. So it's under the Companies Act again, depending on the thresholds that have been given. But IFC is actually applicable to all companies, IFC or ICOFER. There is no that threshold. So for small companies, the requirement may be met in a different way. For large companies, obviously it has to be a different way, but it's for all companies. Now there are certain financial reporting norms. ICOFER is again one of them, but IFRS, Ind AS, which is there. We talked about Sarbanes-Oxley, JSOX, which is in case a company is listed on a Japanese stock exchange, so you have JSOX. In a US stock exchange, the Sarbanes. You have in a Canada stock exchange, the CSOX. If a company is having a presence in Europe and it's in India, then depending on the quantum and all other parameters, GDPR may become applicable. LODR is the clause 49, which is listing obligation and disclosure requirements. So you've got the director's responsibility statement, fraud risk. All of these things are somewhere which are expected of an internal auditor to be looked into, because these are all part of the internal control environment. We may tend to reduce or tweak our scope depending on risk, but at the end of the day, the ask is to answer all these things, which is there. And similarly, I want to highlight, and still we go on to the next slide, is around the 4 pillars of compliance, which we talk about. Now, traditionally, compliance has always been referred to like policies and procedures. So if an internal auditor is there, so the internal auditor is looking at compliance to what is written in the policy or procedure. Is that all? Internal audit is also supposed to look at statutory and regulatory compliances, whether it's to do with corporate, commercial laws, financial laws, HR laws, data privacy laws. We now have the IT Act, which we see any day, and it's almost, I would say, no comparison is equivalent or even slightly more stringent to the GDPR requirement. Now we have the financial reporting compliances also, whether it's to do with ICOFER, IFC, JSOX, SOX. US GAAP, IFRS, depending on if it's a global multinational present in India, these things may become applicable. And then most importantly today, the organizations are moving towards the outsourcing model. So contractual terms, compliance with contractual obligations, whether it's to do with commercial, financial, regulatory, compliance to SLAs. Have SLA been defined? If they are defined, then is it being monitored? Now, if you have a standard contract and you have got SLAs, Snail is going to take us through in terms of how a bot can actually help in terms of ensuring compliance on a regular or a periodic basis as far as the contractual compliances are concerned. So where I'm coming from is that I'm just trying to set the context in terms of what are the various things an auditor is supposed to look at and what is the expectation of the various stakeholders, internal and external, when they are actually asking an auditor that is everything okay, is everything fine. We can go to the next one, Snail. Yeah. Now that we've talked about corporate governance, we've talked about the 4 pillars of compliance, we've talked about how the governance era has been. Let's slightly deep dive into when an internal auditor is looking at, the internal auditor is actually talking about the internal control environment. Now, when you talk about internal control environment and we want to project it in a 2D format, this is what on the slide that you can see will come up. And we'll go from number 3, which is that whatever is happening in the balance sheet and the P&L. So anything that is happening in an organization is ultimately getting reported as part of the financial reporting. Yeah, so which is the balance sheet and the P&L. And number 3, for the purposes of understanding, we can say is actually internal controls over financial reporting. As we move ahead to number 2, we are going into the operational areas of business. We're going into the production, the shop floor. We're going into the legal function, the sales function, procurement function, and any other function that an organization or an e-com company, for instance, may have. So we are actually talking about the operations of the business. So it's IFC, and IFC would include 2 and 3 both. Now, the tone from the top, the tone that has been set from the top is governance. It's actually to say that when we talk about governance, governance is more like, if I'm talking about controls, what are the controls that are cutting across the organization? There could be functional level controls, which are in number 2, also in number 3, but there could be controls that cut across the organization. Do I need a legal compliance framework? So a legal compliance framework will include what are the various laws that are applicable to an organization, what are the various provisions in those laws, what are the various timelines within which those provisions have to be complied with, who is responsible within the organization. So a repository, whether in a tool form or in an Excel form, but a repository at one place, and what are the changes that may come up and how the organization is geared up to come up, address all those changes. So that's a legal compliance framework. We may have these things pocketed in operations and financial reporting as well. Then if I give you another example on governance is MIS, so management information system. So 3 level, good MIS is 3 level, at a tactical, mid and a top level. Now is the MIS at a tactical level also aligned with the KRA and the KPI of the individuals, process owners, the functional heads? Is it also aligned with the functional objectives at the end of the day? And then is it aligned with the mid and the top level MIS? Because it has to seamlessly go through. For instance, in an organization, and we're actually passing through a pandemic time where working capital is perceived to be a challenge, rightly so. Will bank reconciliation not play an important role? It will. And that bank reconciliation could be at an operational level and in an MIS at a tactical level. But then your debt equity ratio and how the working capital is getting managed is actually getting reported to the top level MIS. Now, how all these talking to each other becomes important, because every paisa is going to count over there. So where I'm coming from is that we have the governance number 1, which is entity level controls cutting across. So whether it's ICOFR or IFC or a complete internal control, it will always be there. And as internal auditors, we should look at entity level controls. We should actually look at entity level controls. I'm sure we do, but it should get highlighted also separately. How will what help on all these things? Yeah. So Snail, yeah, we can go to the next one. I just wanted to touch on the 3 lines of defense. So now we talk about 3 lines model. It's always important to look at the past and go to the future, step into the future. If we try and put it in an org form, we'll say the board of directors and the audit committee is at the top and the C level, and this is the earlier erstwhile 3 lines of defense. The first line of defense is where the operational activity is happening. The second line is more like a review mechanism, which is there. And the third line is the internal auditors, followed by the external and the supervisory authority. But I'll go to the next slide, Snail, because I want to talk about the three lines model that is there. What's changed over here? Look at the horizontal arrow, which earlier in the previous slide you wouldn't have seen. Now, is it that the internal auditors were not collaborating with the management and trying to come up with an advisory solution? I can say more like an advice. They were, but I think it's becoming more explicit. And even if you look at the first line role and the second line role, because of the digital environment that we are into and heading into in most of the organizations, I think that's where this is saying that the first time right concept, what you build in a robotic process, from a process point of view, now I am saying what you build in a robotic process, do you really need someone to review it at the first level, or you actually need it at an oversight level, which is the second line? So that's why there is to some extent, I would say, a collapse or a merge of a first and a second line, but the role of internal auditor still remains independent. Most importantly, the management role, if you look at the three lines model, has also moved from, I would say, it has actually moved to an advisory, but not being completely independent at the same time. The independence is with the internal auditor. Yeah. So it's more like collaborating with the management and coming up with solutions which meet the business objectives, and ultimately you have the governing body, which is your board of directors and the senior leadership of an organization. So that's in terms of a three lines model. And actually we can have a detailed discussion around this as well. But Snail, can we go to the next one? I'm just giving a tab on the time because I don't want to hold the breadth of many. So this is basically where I was giving you some examples around entity level controls that cut across the organization. They are actually to do with the governance of an organization, and internal auditor is supposed to look at all of these things. Business risk management, which is actually the risk management framework, a business ethics framework, a whistleblower policy, code of conduct, internal audit function, whether it is independent, roles and responsibilities are being defined in an organization. Now under the Companies Act 2013, we have the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, to be documented, so the roles and responsibilities automatically come there. A legal compliance framework, whether it is, I just explained, a fraud risk management framework, a BCP, business continuity and operations plan, succession planning, again an entity level control, and an MIS framework. So these are at an entity level some of the examples which are there, and as we move to the next one, we'll find at a functional level. Now if you look at any organization, and particularly the manufacturing, you can bucket all the functions into 5. So you have the record to report, which is the finance function, hire to retire, you have the order to cash, which is sales, you have the procure to pay, and the plan to produce. And then you have the fabric of the cyber controls, so IT general controls and application controls, which are there. We go to the next slide, Snail. The next one. So these are the process levels. But when we talk about internal audit, how many times are we looking at an organization as a whole and seeing that is the strategy or the strategic moves that an organization is wanting to do, maybe on account of growth? Is it like a organic growth or an inorganic growth? Are the people, process and platforms scalable enough to actually absorb that sort of a growth, to sustain that sort of a growth? I think in today's times, particularly when we are witnessing this pandemic, the question around organizations being resilient is extremely important for internal auditors to answer. We would have in the recent past witnessed this question that when you now looked at the processes, how do you find the processes being different, and do you see the control getting compromised, whether it's to do with the segregation of duty or it's to do with the delegation of authority particularly? Do you find that these are getting compromised? And if so, are there compensating controls in place, more like a detective control in place? So I think the ask by the internal auditors at the same time is also that are organizations resilient to the external environment which is changing, whether it is to do with the changing business models, whether it is to do with the working capital crunch on account of pandemic, or any technological, I would say, advancement which an organization must embrace, and perhaps it has not for some reason. So all of those things are also critical. If you look at the slide, perhaps most of the times we hover around risk and process and sub-process. So either we do a risk-based audit or we do a process-based audit. But how many times are we looking at the strategic objectives, vision and mission, and trying to, through the risk, feed the strategy looking at the risk that an organization is facing, how are we feeding the strategy and saying perhaps the business model which is currently going on is not the right way to do. You need to do it differently. Maybe you need to switch to a e-market platform model. For instance, example, if I give you a logistics company having a fleet of vehicles and wants to grow, expand, would we actually ask them to buy more vehicles, increase their fleet, or would we say that it could be a different business model and along with that a revenue model which could be looked at, which is now the likes of Uber and Ola and all that? Yeah. So what could be the best model that we actually trying to say that the external environment is posing a risk? Now, based on this risk, you need to revisit the strategy of your growth and accordingly align that, okay, my objectives of the business will be met if I strategize my moves, not by procuring or getting more fleet in the business, but actually having an alternate way to do the business, to run the business. So how many times internal auditors are actually putting, because of this digitization, the robotic audit, I think as auditors will get more quality time, these are the things which from business perspective when auditors come up and suggest, they're going to get a permanent seat, I would say, in the boardroom. Yeah, we can go to the next one, Snehal. Fraud. Quickly, I'll touch on why actually frauds happen. There's a pressure on the individual. There's an opportunity on account of compromise of controls. And there is a rationalization because of culture aspect in the organization, that if the organization is doing anything which perhaps is not correct, why can't I do? So all of these three things, internal pressure and external family pressure, along with an opportunity because of a poor control or governance mechanism, and a rationalization that if supposing there are certain laws which needs to be complied with and there are different ways in which some organizations are doing, then what's wrong in as an individual, as an employee, for me doing something wrong? So culture audit is very important in the coming times, present times also. Pandemic time, I think extremely critical to have a culture audit done. That was the key takeaway which I thought I'd share with you, and these slides will be with you and you can peruse through them later as well. So yeah, Snail, we can go to the next one. Now, we've seen the governance, we've seen risk, we've seen fraud, we've looked at what the regulations are. What should a smart internal auditor do? And we'll now from here, we'll move to the robotic part on the next slide. But what should a smart internal auditor look at from a 360-degree angle? Smart analytics, we're going to touch on that. An eye of forensic. As we dwell on these, we will also touch on certain aspects. Fraud risk. Fraud is a scenario at the end of the day, yeah, with a connivance, internal as well as external, so that there could be some sort of a gain which may come to the individual. Perhaps very different from corruption, but we can't downsize the importance of corruption in some of the organizations, because when we talk about organizations, we are talking about public, private, government, all the organizations. So very important over there. How do you optimize the ERP controls? An ERP can actually give you an optimized control environment of up to 70%, 65% safety. And then you go beyond and you talk about automation, a robotic process automation. But here we'll talk about a robotic audit from an audit point of view. Then on the operational auditing side, if you want to audit an oil and gas company or you want to audit a manufacturing company, will the principles remain the same as far as the business understanding? No, it won't. There won't be joint ventures, there won't be exploratory, these rigs and all that. Nothing would be there compared to, there would be a shop floor line. Yeah. So the nuances of a business, a service business, a banking sector, very different that way. Compliances I've already talked about, and governance we're talking about from the beginning in terms of key management decisions, entity level controls, how a robust control environment is being evaluated, assessed by an internal auditor before stepping into the audit room and saying that audit committee meeting, saying that, okay, things can be done a bit differently, or whatever you recommend at the end of the day, what's the rationale behind it. So that's the smart and digital internal audit. Risk is there, it's all embraced in the fabric of risk, but it has to be beyond risk, what I say. Yeah. So Snail, we can go to the next one now. Yeah, so just wanted to touch on this in terms of how resilient organizations are and the emerging business requirements on account of pandemic. Here we specifically talk about COVID-19. I think there is huge pressure on cash flows. Cyber risk are critical because there's a work from home, bring your own device concept, number one. Number two, I think the environment is also now perhaps, I would not say giving an opportunity, but if the opportunity had existed, it is getting exploited because of that crisis fraud triangle, the pressure and the opportunity and the rationalization which could be there. Very important over there. Standard operating procedures. Do we follow what we had documented earlier, or we need to be more flexible, but at the same time not compromising on controls? Pricing in today's times, do we sustain the same pricing or we go with a different model? Safety of people, extremely critical. Safety of people today. Compliances, new compliances that the organization are supposed to follow in this pandemic times. Fraud risk. I think cyber risk, fraud risk, cyber forensic, if you can call it cyber forensic, is extremely critical to be looked at. And all said and done, how is the operational business performance moving towards excellence in the new rules of the game? Yeah, is an extremely critical thing. That's what I think an internal auditor beyond the policies, procedures would be expected and is expected to answer. So I think as we now talk about bots in the coming slides and a couple of next few minutes, the focus of internal auditors perhaps can move on any of or all of these things. So yeah, now Snehal, I think you will be picking on the robotic part. So over to you, Snehal.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sid. So I'll start the robotic audit presentation. So let me start with the legacy issues which generally all the internal audit face as part of any internal audit engagement, starting from planning to overall execution. So what we are talking about is, as a first point, is data management and ERPs. What we understand is that there is a lot of dependency on human experience of how to use the ERPs, utilize the ERPs, download reports, manage data within the ERP, do the checks, the standard hash total checks, the balance checks when the data is downloaded before it is utilized for any of the audit purposes. When we speak about the audit team, there is a lot of dependency on the experience of the audit team, whether a junior level team member is auditing a particular area, whether a manager is auditing a particular area, or whether director or a partner level person is also executing that particular area. There's a different set of experience and skill set that is brought on to the table when there is a different individual auditing that particular area. Especially when we talk about the audit coverage and overall audit periodicity or frequency, what we understand is these are also legacy issues which are very much curbed because of a lot of constraints at the end of manpower or because of the audit cost overall when we speak about from a budget point of view. So what happens is in the end there is not 100% coverage or transaction testing which is done, which eventually might result a little costly when we speak about specific controls from a forensic or a leakage point of view or cost savings point of view specifically, or a compliance point of view. Also, when we talk about reporting, what we note is that there are a lot of team members who tend to have different skills when they are reporting. So even report drafting is one skill set where a lot of dependency is there based on the experience, and a lot of dynamism is there. It's not a very standard structured report that comes out every time. So every time one particular area is being audited and a similar particular observation is noted, there is very much possibility that the report drafting is done differently every time. Last point with regards to on-demand visibility, audit is something which is planned and scheduled based on the budget and availability of manpower during the year, and in a very seamless audit environment, we see less number of special or ad hoc kind of audits. So what happens is that when there is a important information from an audit point of view required to have any decision making done by the management or at board or audit committee level, the availability of the resources and on-demand audit becomes a challenge. So these are certain legacy issues that all of us from an audit background have been experiencing on regular basis. Now, these are issues which are starting point of how a bot through robotic audit is going to address these challenges and bring in a lot of seamless interaction and a lot of comfort around audits. So generally, when we talk about internal audits, around 65% of our audit checklist is 65 to 80% is around transaction testing and around control effectiveness. Around 15% is what on a generic basis is around process and system walkthroughs. 10% around documentation, and similarly minimum amount of time that we spend is in the vouching and physical verification space. So how the audit eventually has evolved is getting more into the digital data, which is nothing but data flowing from the systems in a soft copy, and transaction testing, analytics, taking screenshots, system configuration checks being the core center of any of these internal audit or any other kind of audit checklist, whereby the documentation, the physical reviews are left to very specific requirements. So this is how the audit function has evolved, and with this evolvement has evolved the need for robotic audit. Now, Sid earlier mentioned the 3 lines of models. So how a robotic journey is taken up by corporates or enterprises or by business functions at a micro level is for various lines of models. So when we talk about the first line of model, where we've been talking very aggressively about process automation within various functions, from finance to payroll to inventory, procurement, complete supply chain, a lot of these functions. The robotics has now started its journey towards the second and third line of defense. When we talk about second line of defense, we're talking more of about the compliance, the risk management, audits, the automation, where IFC, SOX, and these kind of requirements can be automated through robotic solution to a great extent, ensuring a lot of coverage, frequency, and lot of reach, which is currently not possible. So I'll touch upon this area in detail in the next slides. When we talk about particularly the third line of defense, which is the internal audit and continuous control monitoring, this is one of those significant areas where robotics is getting a breakthrough now, and the importance of robotics within a CCM environment, and how real-time monitoring of controls, specifically in anti-fraud, leakage related areas, cost savings, and these kind of specific areas are giving maximum ROI to the audit teams, and also giving a lot of comfort at the board and audit committee level, where the audit team is able to give that assurance that we are monitoring the key controls or controls that are having an impact on our financials or having an impact on particular business activities which are very, very key in nature. So generally, when we break up the whole internal audit engagement, the percentages that you see are the time percentage involvement broken down into different activities. So these are the 7 to 8 key activities which we generally execute as part of internal audit engagement. So around 8% of our time generally goes in reviewing the previous audit reports, going through the RCMs, and making a risk management, going through a complete risk management, and planning the plan overall for the internal audit for the next year or the coming quarter. Second is overall transaction, when we talk about is data collation, cleansing, and validation. So this is one area which is very, very mundane and repetitive in nature, where we generally have junior team members sitting extracting data throughout the day from various ERPs and checking whether the hash totals are matching from the system and the data has been correctly downloaded or no. The third piece is more of after downloading the data, it is about sample selection if we are doing a sample based audit, and more of mail exchanges with the process owners on getting clarity. When we talk about the fourth process, which is 35% of the chunk main activity within the internal audit function is the actual transaction testing, the exception reporting, and the mail communication of these draft observations with the client. So when we talk about from the IA perspective, the data analytics, checking system configurations, these are certain areas which are very repetitive and mundane in nature, and which are very logic based. So this is how right now an internal audit activity is driven. Moving to the next stage, which is taking 15% of the time, is around management discussions on the draft observations, where false positives could be one of the key notes, and from there on how to move to final observations. Moving to the sixth step, which is preparing the draft reports and dashboards, and last is the final report presentation and storage of all the audit reports in a central repository. When we talk about this key 7 steps within the IA engagement, around 75 to 80% of these steps are such which fall under the robotic audit scope. So in all the boxes which you see in green are high level of automation areas from a robotic point of view. Areas which you see in amber are medium level automation, and areas which you see in red are mainly low level of automation, where a lot of judgment or manual intervention is required. So in a nutshell, when we speak about robotics, we can say that from data extraction to drafting reports and saving and storing the reports in a central repository, all these activities are very easily doable from a robotic point of view. Moving to the next slide, where we'll show you certain scope areas, and we'll try to relate these areas from a business case scenario as to how robotics can help in a generic internal audited audit environment or an area, and also from a very niche audit requirement. So I'll start with the first box on the left, which is reading documents. Now we can easily rely on robotics with the OCR technology. Now, since we are also partners with Automation Anywhere as an OEM, they also have IQ bot, which is an intelligent bot. Now, what happens is these kind of bots, which with inbuilt OCR technology, can read through the contracts and match the invoicing with the contracts and give the exceptions before invoices are booked in the system. Now, similarly, reading any kind of document in PDF, Word, or Excel, or any text or any digital form is very much possible. Also, from giving you another example, which is KYC or in a lending business, from a audit which is post lending audit, where we are able to do 100% audit based on a checklist, where based on the checklist the documentations can be reviewed which have been provided by the person who's taken the loan, and based on the parameter and checklist we can throw up exceptions via bots. So this is one area which is very unique, which might not fall under an absolute general internal audit area, but it is a very unique kind of an audit which is done by a lot of NBFCs and banks. This is currently done manually, but now since digitized data is coming into play, this can also be done through robotics to a great extent. Data extraction and entry and document storage and trail. So a lot of time involvement is there, as mentioned previously, from an internal audit point of view, to extract this particular data and validate this data, clean the data, and do certain data entries and store this data. Now, for all of these mundane repetitive activities, the bots can be easily utilized. Fourth point is access to government website and external portals. Now, there's a lot of time the human workforce, the human audit team spends in getting into GST portals, for example, to check the authenticity of the GST number, or maybe a few stat related identifications that needs to be done, or maybe also to check the current status from a shipping line or a courier agent related website. A bot is easily able to interact with these third-party applications, which we mentioned in the fifth point, which is interfacing with system application and tools. So bot does not require extended APIs as an additional cost. What bot does is simply like what a human does, giving bot the user ID and password. Bot will get into the system wherever it has to through the user ID and password, and start repeating the work that a human does. So once you give the user ID and access a password, to bot to access SAP, it will get into SAP, put in the T code as customized, and download the report. Likewise, get into the third-party portals. For example, a CMO or a CRO portal, where a pharma company probably wants to check what is the current status, from information point of view, whether the batches are on timely basis, or there is any audit needs to be done from a batch timeliness point of view. So what will access to a CRO CMO portal, if the access is provided, download the report, do the validation, and throw up the result. So this is very much doable, from a robotic point of view. Point number 7 and 8 specifically talk about engagements like IFC, SOX, and internal audit, where a lot of sample selection or maybe 100% data wherever audit possible, to be audited. A lot of transaction testing, data analysis, screenshots, and configuration checks are very much doable by bots. These are very easy use cases for robotics. So specifically, if you see in an IT scenario where certain reports are supposed to be extracted and SOD conflict checks need to be done, which is one of the POCs also that I would show later on, is very much easily doable, where the bot can easily take screenshots also, and just save it and report it. Moving to the next one, which is ninth, from an exception reporting point of view. When we see a lot of exception reports thrown up by the bots, this can be converted into the required format, which is PPT, Excel, Word, and in either of these formats, all the reports can be reported, emailed to the process owners, and also query related discussion trails can be mapped end to end. So this becomes an end-to-end audit trail from the existing application point of view, Outlook or whatever email configurations we have. The bot will easily interface with that and get this thing very smooth. In the 11th and 12th point, when we are talking about reporting MIS and dashboard, what we are talking about is end-to-end MIS and dashboarding from an audit and process. Both point of view can be done by the bots, because eventually it is more or less logic based. 12th is a very interesting point from a library point of view, where a lot of questions we address from audit trail point of view, as to who's monitoring the bot, and whether the whatever activities is being done by the bot, is it being logged, and do we have a trail to show to the stat auditors, or do we have a trail to show to any external agencies or any global audits? Yes, we are able to configure a lot of logs when it comes to the bot activities, and with time, exactly the timestamp is absolutely available and can be configured, whereby we can show a complete library of activities, transactions taken, executed by the bot, and also complete bot audit trail, which can be submitted as assurance to the external auditors, stat auditors, etc. So these are certain key scope areas. If we look at the top, where we are looking at the 5 boxes, what happens through robotic audit is eventually the roadmap is of creating a center of excellence of digital workforce, which is robotics, whereby the robotic audit is executed from one local desk, and we are able to access all the global pan-India regions through robotic audit. Now, when we talk about this scenario, a post-COVID scenario, where the budgets are absolutely tightened up, and when we have limited access to travel, and it is a major safety issue as well, a lot of audits might get compromised, or the scope might get reduced, or the timelines might not be feasible to conduct the audits as planned for this year. How do we try and enable to audit more controls in this kind of a scenario, and ensure that it is a touchless audit, it is an audit where we are getting sufficient assurance, and we can provide this kind of an assurance to other stakeholders also. So all of this from a center of excellence of audit is very much possible through robotics. When we move to the 4th tab on the top, so this is somewhere where we are bringing on or showing how the value proposition of robotics is there in a post-COVID scenario. And generally, when we talk about a robotic journey, when audit team starts with, we generally suggest of having minimal bots in place, and try and have these kind of time savings from an FT point of view, and key areas being addressed, so that that comfort is there from an audit point of view, that yes, this technology works, this technology gives a lot of savings, and from this technology I am able to reach a lot of corners globally and in India. This is what we've been talking about, that what are the key areas that, you know, in this kind of a post COVID scenario we would want to touch upon through robotics, which currently we might not be able to because of a lot of limitations. So robotics can have this CCM mechanism which brings in a lot of business insights from core operations. Lot of revenue leakage and cost optimization related areas can be audited. We can call it as revenue assurance audit, which hospitals or a lot of service industry can be can, you know, work upon from their the masters, the tariff masters, the uploads, the delay in billing, the incorrect billing. A lot of these activities can be very well monitored through robotics, and real-time reporting can be done so that the damage is controlled within the timelines, and it is not a detective mechanism which works after maybe a few months or maybe a few days. It can be done on real-time basis. When we talk about anti-fraud, very much possible through robotics, where these early warning signals from a banking point of view, from bank audits, when we talk about internal audits, specifically in certain verticals from procurement pricing point of view, we can have these alerts or alarms through robotics, which will give timely, you know, information as to whether there is any early warning signal or there is any kind of a fraud scenario which has been, you know, red flagged in the system, which maybe an audit will pick up after months down the line. From a regulatory compliance point of view, this kind of a robotics can be used by a lot of NBFCs, BFSI, and a lot of clients, where a lot of audits around compliances are there from an IFC, SOX, and other compliances point of view. And access and security, very important area where 24/7, 365 days monitoring is required, but there is a lot of compromise from a cost point of view. So why not leverage robotics to give us this kind of access to these areas. So I'll quickly move on to a couple of case studies or business cases where through robotics we can bring about a lot of efficiency, savings, and also directly impacting PNL in a post-COVID kind of a scenario. So now this is a business case where we have used robotics to review purchase register and vendor master end to end on periodic basis, weekly and monthly basis, whereby a lot of incorrect accounting information and lapses which have been updated in the invoice master, incorrect reconciliations is a result of that, and how a bot will help to timely identify the GST related non-compliances or input tax credit related issues, and how we can save a lot of working capital going as taxes in that particular month, and how we can ensure that ITC can be availed on real-time basis through these kind of GST audits where purchase register is end-to-end audited. So for one of key clients, we've been able to develop 41 such validations or audit checklist whereby the purchase register is end-to-end scrutinized from GST point of view, taxation point of view, invoice related information point of view, vendor related checks, authenticity checks of GST numbers, and we've been able to ensure that these are highlighted to the team on real-time basis, which enables the team to ensure that the input tax credit is correctly taken. Now there are both two sides of this coin. If the team has been taking additional input tax credit because of lack of reconciliations which were actually being done only once at the year end or maybe quarterly, now we are able to do these kind of reconciliations successfully through bots, through these GST audits, through robotics on weekly and monthly basis, and we are able to bring in a lot of savings from which directly impacts the PNL. Now from the other side of the coin, where the team is actually putting in a lot of working capital right now blocked in paying taxes, and at the year end ITC is being identified and the rectifications are done, and then the ITC is being availed for and the refund is being asked for. So in these kind of cases, a lot of working capital is blocked and interest is lost, potential interest. Now, how we are able to bring in a lot of efficiency around this and have a lot of savings for the management is what this business case speaks about. Eventually, pure play, when we talk about manual effort, most of the organizations are not having these kind of 41 to 45 exhaustive validations and checks around GST audits, or from an internal audit second model of line or defense that we talk about, where at least 60 to 70 hours one or two team members should put in to ensure these kind of real-time savings are there and efficiencies there. Whereas when we talk about bot, the bot is able to do it within 8 to 9 hours in a month and bring in lakhs and crores of savings when we talk about from an ITC point of view. So this is one business case. I will quickly jump upon the other business case from a cyber IT and SOD conflict point of view, where when we talk about E070 report, which is extracted from SAP, how in a for a client where the SAP related data, the Solvent related data, and the devices table, all of these tables were reconciled, and how certain screenshots were taken, and how the bot was able to identify the SOD conflicts, how the bot was able to identify the change management which was unauthorized, is something that it can be easily proven through use of robotics. So eventually, how robotics brings on this end-to-end kind of a check where there is no manual intervention, through standard logic, checklist, and customization, an audit trail can be completely monitored, and lot of value add can be brought on from a daily audit point of view. Now this is one example where we've spoken to a lot of IT, cyber, and security teams, which mention that these kind of checks are very, very important, but because of lack of manpower, they are unable to do it from an audit point of view on daily basis. So this is what robotics brings onto the table. So I'll show a demo now, which is a demo POC kind of a proof of concept, whereby a bot will be able to do various transaction testing analysis in an Excel format, download the report from ERP system. After the analysis, it is also reporting the exceptions, and also these exceptions are converted into a PPT format and email to the process owners. So this is what we are talking about, an end-to-end automation brought about by the robotics. So this is a demo bot. So it was a live bot.
To extract data or report from
We've taken a video
analysis using bot login credentials. These extracted reports are then stored in a specified folder location.
So the bot is accessing SAP, downloading the data and saving it. So this is the user ID password which is being put in the system by bot. The T code is put in, basic information is put in. All this is customized within the bot, and the bot is downloading the report in the required format as a human does. So the bot has downloaded the report, it has done its cleaning and validation, and now the internal auditor is using the bot
master data to initiate analysis. Bot calculates refund due date as per the formula, off date plus 15 days grace period.
So this is where
Exception testing scenario number 1. Refund payment date is after payment due date.
So this is the first logic that we've given to the bot. So if you see the T column,
copies exceptional items identified into new sheet.
Bot found the exceptions and it is putting it another sheet.
Bot initiates to calculate interest payable on delayed payment of refund to customers based on the following formula. 8% of refund amount divided by 365 then multiplied by number of days of delay after due date.
So first bot identified what was the delay in
Bot calculate
the
difference
refund.
between interest payable and actual interest paid.
Now the bot calculated interest payable.
Actual interest paid is less than or greater than interest payable amount calculated in previous step and paste in separate sheet. Exception testing for both scenarios successfully completed by bot. Bot start preparing summary report.
So bot identified whether the interest payable and paid matches or no, and this is how a summary is created by a bot, where the case is audited and all these details are mentioned.
Bot opens draft report template based on the observation number mapping maintained in backend. Bot initiates report drafting with details of observation.
So now for the transaction testing run and the observation noted, the bot is mapping that information with the report. So every time the bot runs this observation and there is this exception, bot will come to this standard library of report, the slide, and will update the information over here. So a draft report is prepared by the bot. More or less verbatim remains the same. The numerics keep changing. So an end-to-end trail is created by the bot from noting the observation to drafting the observation. Now the bot is using the email ID access and drafting the email to the user and sending the observations to the user. So this is how the bot puts a summary on the cover page. Now it is attaching the annexure and
Analysis
report.
report successfully sent by bot to respective users.
Yes. So this is the first POC, proof of concept, where the bot has end-to-end done the audit and it has shared this particular information with the user. I'll show another variety where bot is able to access external applications and fetch the data from there and then do complex transaction testing.
Visible, Snail, this is visible.
Okay.
But Snail, you'll have to move a bit fast because I want Kaushik also to take on the advanced analytics. Just keeping a tab on the
Yes, sir.
screen.
Sure.
Login credentials to extract and save the cost report in specified folder location. Bot sanitizer.
So I'll move little quickly. So if you see in this particular video, the bot is actually formatting column A. So this is the data cleansing that the bot is able to do. So how we can use power of robotics to do these basic simple checks in the data downloaded. Now over here, I will quickly move on to, so these are multi-layer transaction testing, but we'll quickly move to the testing where the bot is going to go to external portals and fetch the data. So this is the bot worksheet where the bot is trying to capture and audit the invoice submitted by a vendor.
Daily fuel price data from IOCL
Transporter
website into an Excel file.
So the transporter has provided petrol bills. Is captured certain petrol information and distance. So the bot is taking that invoice, capturing the data in Excel, and getting into IOCL website, checking that day's oil price and downloading it.
Into the trip variance Excel sheet.
Similarly, the bot is accessing Google Maps putting in the destination mentioned in the invoice, and capturing it in the Excel file.
Bot adds 20% to the Google Map distance as the tolerance limit and calculates the difference between the Google Maps distance and distance as per report.
So this
Then
is
you're
how.
going to,
Taxes with
you're
negative
going to
Yeah,
show another
that's,
demo also. Is there some other demo?
pass.
yeah, I'll quickly move.
No, I'm going to show the SOD one.
I'll just show one GSTR 2A.
Okay, yeah. Because then we'll have to move with Kaushik.
Yeah, so just one slide on ROI is pending, which I'll just quickly run through in 1 minute. Here the bot is logging into the GST portal.
User manually enters the CAPTCHA.
The CAPTCHA is being entered by the user. And I'll just quickly fast forward it a bit, where the bot is downloading all the information and reconciling the
Reading
data.
from the master file. Data reading completed from the master file. Dictionary from master file created. Excel file filtered with relevant data. Performing calculations for GST reconciliation.
So if you see here at the bottom, the bot is creating 3 Excel files of matched data, unmatched data, and not found data. So this is an end-to-end GSTR 2A reconciliation that the bot is able to do, which the humans are doing currently. So this is overall end-to-end a few videos that we wanted to show. I'll just quickly move to one slide and then we'll hand it over to Kaushik.
Sure. I think the GST 2RA, this is critical and important because there's a lot of potential for saving as well at the same time. Yeah, and it's a tedious work.
Is the PPT visible, Sid?
Yeah, that's visible. Yeah.
So this is IFC. So from an IFC touch point also, from a data download to sampling to executing, updating the RCMs from a status of pass and fail, and reporting and creating dashboard is absolutely doable by bots. Similarly in SOX as well. I'll quickly move to the ROI. So here when we talk about robotics, how it gets the ROI business value to the user is a bot works 24/7, 365. So whereas humans work for around 8 hours, and the speed of the bot when it's working in Excel and Word docs is around bare minimum 5 to 8x. So the swiftness is extremely high, and what we are able to do is ensure that damages are detected very real-time basis. Yeah, and this is just in a nutshell how in a post-COVID scenario, the cost per control is what we are aiming to bring down using robotics, increase the reach, ensure safety, and ensure 100% coverage assurance to various stakeholders. So I think this is it from my end, Sid. I'll move to the next slide, which is the analytics section for Kaushik.
Kaushik, yeah, Kaushik, you're there.
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Yeah, you had to wait a lot. Apologies for that. I think, but I'm sure the participants would have enjoyed this so far and must be waiting for your big data analysis. Over to you, Kaushik.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sid. And my sincere apologies to all of you. My network is a bit unstable, hence I'm kept my video off just to kind of ensure that my presentation kind of being delivered seamlessly. So Sid and Snehal, they have already kind of laid out the foundation in terms of Sid really kind of explained the framework quite well, and he also spoke about how some of the new age technologies are playing a significant role as far as audit is concerned, right? And Snehal took us through in terms of how some of these automations are actually helping in this entire audit process. What I'll do, and Sid, how much time I have?
So we have another half an hour easily, yeah. Then we'll open for questions also. So that's I'm just trying to accommodate that. But Kaushik, you can go ahead, not an issue. I know there are a lot of insights you're going to share, so please.
Sure. So I'll try to conclude by 6:15 or so that we will have good 10-15 minutes of time to answer the questions that will come in, right? So Neeraj did kind of introduce me, and just to add, and this is, I'm sure, like all of you are coming from various organizations and so on. Analytics in audit is something not new, right? So I did my first audit analytics project back in 2005-6 during that time. And I was actually kind of working for a Big Four, and the US audit firm wanted to do some kind of data analysis, which is a mandatory requirement as far as SAS 99 is concerned, right? So what we used to do, like we used to kind of look into various financial data, starting from general ledger, trial balance, and so on, and kind of a lot of analysis is to be done, which was kind of was taken by the auditor as a lead for further investigation, right? So setting that context, like what we generally see as far as can I request the operator to kind of make it full screen the presentation, so that because some of my slides are a little text heavy.
So Snehal, you're
go to the previous slide. Yeah, cool. Sure. No, I was just thinking, because anyway my video is off, whether this can be kind of made full screen from that matter. Cool. So yeah. So from the audit analytics point of view, like the 3-4 areas, and all of us know that as I was telling you, that this is not a new concept. So this the use of analytics in internal audit is something already known to us, but kind of to set the context, when we kind of spend maybe a minute or so. What we're trying to achieve through analytics is that we are trying to kind of helping auditors in terms of bringing some insights, which is kind of through analyzing a lot of data, be it from the P2P point of view or other process point of view, like it can be taken into from any process or event point of view, and then we are basically bringing a lot of insights, which is basically helping the auditors to kind of focusing on the right aspect of the audit, spending more time on that part, and also like we are building a solutions out of it, which basically helping you to kind of spending more time looking to the analysis rather than doing the analysis, right? So that's one of the key area that benefit that we bring to the table. Second is that it's an ask. Now in today's time, I really need to kind of see certain things. Anyway, what I'm doing is that I'm kind of looking into the events which has already happened. Now I need to know those events very quickly, almost on real-time basis, right? Even if not on an hourly basis, but at least every day my data should get uploaded, my data should get refreshed, and I should be able to see what are the events that has happened which are not following certain procedures, certain controls that are put in place, right? So which are those red flags that I should kind of get to know. Then performing the deeper analytics, because that's where the real value comes into picture. right? If I can I actually using analytics bring certain patterns or behavior which is just happening on a constant basis? Can I, can I identify if a double payment is a problem? Like, on which other situations this kind of double payments are happening? Is it, happening by a specific set of users on a certain type of transaction, certain type of payments to a certain set of vendors, and maybe in a certain period of time? Like, those transactions, are they happening during the office hours, or they are happening off office hours, right? Or are they happening actually during holidays and the weekends? Those transactions are being passed, those payments are being made, right? So identifying those patterns. So that is what kind of, we are able to bring a lot of value, because those streams or the patterns, if they're identified appropriately, I can actually give you a kind of a proactive view, instead of that, event has already happened and then you're analyzing, but can you really kind of, get a proactive view of the entire scenario, right? And then more transparency, because what we're trying to do or achieve is basically we are trying to look into this entire data set. Earlier, while you're kind of in a if we don't use data analytics, then generally what happens is that we take a sample out of it, right? And then we kind of perform some kind of basic checks, and from that we are drawing the kind of observations. Instead of that, we are empowering to kind of give you this entire kind of looking into the entire data. Taking a quick a clue from what Sid just said, like big data. Why we are saying big data? Because we are not restricting ourselves only into the data which is being generated by the transactional systems like ERP, right? Or your accounting systems. We are also looking data which is beyond that, and it can be as well some kind of unstructured data, maybe like scanned copy of certain documents. Even that can be my source of data, and that data also can be analyzed. We are focusing on that part, right? Again, like the advantage is kind of more time is being spent. So this is are all kind of regular benefits, but on top of this, in the current scenario, when we are in a very peculiar situation in the last 6 months, we never kind of gone through this kind of situations where I need to perform internal audit related activities, but my ability to be on site, my ability to sit down with the business stakeholders and having understanding certain processes are kind of quite limited. Still, we are performing, right? In that scenario, even in that scenario, like if I can really kind of bring a lot of insights by doing meaningful analysis of the data, that really helps helps the internal audit process, right? Moving to the next slide, where I'll be talking about a little bit of how it works, right? Snehal, if you can move to the next slide. So the thank you. So looking into kind of in the process, like the end-to-end process, that how it works. Again, like this is something maybe kind of some of you are already doing, or kind of already kind of tried this process. This is we first of all start with the kind of understanding the audit objective and the scope, identify the potential analytics area. So I think that's very important, right? So potential analytics area is not limited to just identifying the control gaps and raising a red flag. So that's a bare minimum. Even Snehal spoke about it, like through some of the automation techniques, we can achieve some of them to some extent, right? Here we are talking about like more deeper analysis and so on. So first of all, looking into that. Then kind of as I was talking about, like data is not only about your regular data set. You look into the data which is coming from ERP, non-ERP, external sources, unstructured data point, and so on. Like some of those data are also kind of being used. So for example, I very recently I did a work for one of the conglomerate from the travel and expense point of view, right? And the ask was, how kind of those bookings are happening, and this was kind of it was a mix of audit plus business ask. I'll just put it that way. So the audit ask was to understand whether employees are following the procedures laid out in the manual, like in terms of booking tickets in a given period of time, and there we kind of identify situations where even for a very planned events, say for seminars, training, and so on, people are actually booking tickets within a week span, right? Whereas these events are mostly kind of long-term planned events. But our analysis was not just limited to that. We basically also helped. That's where the business angle came in. We also showed the business, like what kind of value or what kind of savings that could have achieved. Anyway, so focus is for today's presentation, focus is not the business part of it. I'll kind of come to this audit part of it. Like, I'll just give an example of how we are using external data. At that point of time, we actually use the travel agent, the data that is coming from the travel agent in terms of booking and so on, at what rate is being booked, whether the ticket is already being already those tickets are being picked, which is the lowest price as per the kind of the company policy or not, are also being looked into. So they are kind of consume the agent data. Even from on that particular engagement, we also looked into the third-party data, like data coming from the guest house booking and so on, where company has its own and third-party managed guest house. So those data is also been taken care of. Just an example. Then the looking into the various enhanced looking to the audit scope, which we kind of already spoke about. We brainstorm with the audit team and try to understand the testing hypothesis, like various testing hypotheses that we kind of form. Then we test those hypotheses, which is a very key part of it. And once the hypotheses are being tested, that's basically kind of help us to build the rule engine. I'll talk about it, right? And so finally it's going to the kind of looking to the some of the sample results, which gets validated to the users, and if they're okay with it and they understood that rule part, whether it's been giving the right results and so on, accordingly we move to the final creation of the visualization. So basically the final outcome should be given in such a manner to the auditors or the audit team, so that they can consume that information readily. And as I said, this entire process has to be kind of end-to-end automated, right? So enter data extraction, data collections, data cleansing. Data cleansing plays a significant role. Like I was working with a conglomerate on the chemical industry. Very recently, like we're working on the P2P process, right? And we realized, like there's a lot of data challenges in terms of the, say, when a vendor details that we're looking into, the supply details we're looking into, the origin city is kind of is not there, like various plant information which is there, the kind of location information is not properly given. So even fixing those data quality issues also brings the right, also is a critical activity, because without doing those activities, whatever analysis I'm going to produce is going to kind of give a junk result, which is not going to be very much useful. So I have to really take care of the data quality part of it, right? Now, what are the kind of various benefits? I already spoke about it in the previous slide. Maybe like one or two areas. So primary focus that we have is bringing that intelligence, that insights, which is useful for the audit team. So my analysis should be kind of really give you a direction where you need to do the investigation further, right? That direction you should get very clearly. It should not just be some charts and graphs which will talk about, okay, this many POs were raised without peer, or maybe that those are gaps. Like I understand that fully, and that will also be part of the part of my analysis outcome. But that will not be the focus of the analysis outcome. Rather, I'll try to kind of put some analysis which will give you some actionable, which is doing some kind of further investigation, so that you can actually find the root cause of the problem, and there, like you can really take some corrective measures in terms of either process change, or if it is some challenges with some stakeholders or something, you can really kind of take some business call out of it along with the function, the business function, right? Similarly, like another area that generally, like what we focus is basically like all the incidences which has happened, we are doing that analysis and bring that insight. That insight is quite helpful. Can I also bring out some kind of earlier identification, identification of anomalies, right? Kind of is kind of what I call it, a solution which can really give you kind of early warning system of certain risk that, or certain breaches that is going to happen. Now there is a classic dilemma whether the audit team should take the ownership of it, because that's something business has to take care of it. I fully understand that that aspect, but point is, with analytics you can actually identify those situations and those patterns which can help you to identify future risk propositions, right? I'll talk about some of the examples in the subsequent slide. Snehal, if you can move to the next one. So while working on these analysis, there are 3 or 4 key components to make it successful, right? One is the data sourcing part of it, which is identifying the right sources of the data. From internal audit point of view, ERP is generally the majority of the sources of the data. Sometimes also manual data, right? So that's also kind of become a critical source. But identifying that source, and also the quality, as I was kind of talking about it, the data quality becomes the major challenge. Like how are we going to kind of improve the quality of the data? So certain part of the quality of the data, you can still improve. Say for example, like in the last slide I was talking about, say from the supplier origination, or supplier address, like something like is required for some kind of answers, right? Now if I don't have the correct city, but if I still have the pin code in the address available, right pin code, I can get the right city name, right? But say for example, for certain analysis, I'm doing some geospatial analysis, right? And for that I need the right pin code, and if the right pin code is not there, it's very difficult to kind of get the right pin code by going through the address details, like which locality and so on, because your address may not have all those details. So certain data quality issues to be handled in the source, which is ERP. Certain aspect of data quality issues can be handled in the analytics layer, so that we can always kind of take care of. Second is the data analysis and mining, which is the kind of a core part of it. After we look into getting this entire data set, we basically try to form certain hypotheses, like depending on the past trend of the data and so on, like what are the various hypotheses we form, and for that we also take certain input. So what we do that we use 2 set of knowledge, like we have our own our own set of hypotheses or the rules that is kind of defined, and we also sit down with the business and the internal team and kind of get their input, and that will kind of form this entire set of rules, which basically brings us to the next level, which is the rule engine, which is they are basically like we kind of put the rules together into a system where we get all that is like we pass the data. So basically how the rule engine works, once you have the rules defined, their basis or hypothesis formation and so on, you pass on all your transactions through the rule engine, right? And the rule engine will give you the kind of a set of output, which is basically like the transactions which doesn't pass through that rule, right? Now those becomes my exceptions and so on. Now there's a lot of analysis happens on those exceptions in terms of understanding the trend of that exceptions, as I was talking of the double payment issues, like is it happening through by a set of users to a set of vendors during a particular time of the day of the week, all the streams that we kind of look into and give you a complete picture through our data narration or storytelling. That's very important. Like sometimes we believe that after we do all the analysis, we just create some pie charts, bar graphs, and our job is done. So that's where the biggest mistake happens, because as an internal auditor, as an internal audit team, you need to consume the informations, the analysis appropriately. And to enable you that, I have to really present that analysis in such a manner that it becomes intuitive, and you can really kind of you can really kind of get the right directions, like where you need to focus, for the further investigation and so on. Right? So I'll move to the next one. I'll go a little quick. I understand I'm just going a little slow maybe. So this is something kind of it's a kind of type of various analysis that we do. Right? Few examples are illustrative. Some can be kind of using text analysis, right? Which is something like we commonly use, right? Where there are a lot of text that comes up, as part of the transactions that happens, like note of the transactions that we kind of capture, and there we do a lot of text analysis to kind of get a lot of insights that comes out of it. Okay. There sometimes we find that inconsistency in the way that analysis can happen. Really sorry. Now, looking into this, the unusual themes or fictitious entries that takes place. That's another group of our interest, which is basically like I was talking of, like certain entries which are being passed during weekends or public holidays. So I'm not saying all the time that the catch is not always these entries are are kind of with a malicious intention, right? There can be a solid business reasons for passing certain entries during the holidays or kind of weekends and so on, right? Or after office hours. But is there the catch is how we can correlate it with some kind of other incidents that is happening, like being like we are approving certain things very fast, or we are making some payments without right set of approvals and so on, right? So if we can link those few things, then it becomes more interesting and becomes more insightful. Just looking into something in silos sometimes doesn't really give you right insight. Then basic TAT kind of a thing, which is basically like looking into the TATs of goods rejections, goods received. So those are kind of quite straightforward, which kind of gives you how a process control is being maintained. So which is something kind of already being looked into. The more interesting part of it is the deep dive insights into the invoices, payments, and it can be anything. Like as I said, it's just a illustrative list. There can be many such analysis which can be kind of looked into. So so many times we found that these payments are happening where the invoice numbers are being manipulated to some extent with some kind of malicious intention, right? So almost kind of similar kind of invoice number, which is system is reading them as same two different invoice and double payment is happening, right? So looking into those aspects are kind of going to get there. So kind of deep dive insights, etc., like which is very meaningful, especially from the fraud point of view. Like if you really need to kind of look into certain things, certain analysis from the fraud point of view are quite useful. Again, as I said, these are quite kind of illustrative, but there are a lot many similar analysis can happen. Yeah, let's move. Yeah, so how I'll keep myself very brief on this slide in terms of maybe like little it talks about a little bit inside the rule engine how it happens, right? Maybe interesting for the kind of developer community, like people who are actually working on the rule engine and so on. So basically, like it's a framework that we have where we kind of start with the rules, the metrics, the definitions of it. We kind of decide the score range now depending on the particular instance.
See, sorry, Kaushik, I think this is, to my mind, an extremely important slide, because what goes behind is the future of internal audit, or rather the present also. When you talk about bots, when you talk about this, so I think it is extremely critical. Yeah, the developers do play a role, but I think somewhere the logics that are getting built, is it actually coming up to meet the business objectives? So this is, to my mind, I think it's wonderful you are explaining this slide, because this is extremely critical. That's what I see as a roadmap for internal auditors in future. They will have to look at these logics. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Sid. So, well, this kind of being done from a very, from a very specific scenario. Again, it's quite an illustrative one. So basically, what it says is that you have the kind of rules defined, and then you are basically kind of calculating this. You're basically creating the scoring part of it, right? The scoring mechanism is being kind of built. Now, the good part of it is that the framework is there, so which we kind of use, so that we really don't need to kind of start from scratch. So we can basically kind of start from the framework which is there, and then we kind of modify this framework depending on the specific focus that we have, or particular area that we need to focus, right? And which basically brings down to something called kind of a data model, right? Our data model is basically kind of helping you to organize the data in such a manner that it can support some of this analysis that I spoke about in last slide, right? I spoke about those 3 or 4 buckets of analysis, right? So data model is basically kind of helping us to kind of organize the data in such a manner it can really kind of perform those analysis. I promised a seat 6:15. I already overshot by 2 minutes. I'll probably quickly go through the subsequent section, which is an advanced analytics component. Snehal, if you can move to the next slide. I'll pass on this slide because it's primarily kind of talking about what kind of benefits that we can get in a particular scenario. So this is something I already kind of spoke about it. This for a particular case study that we kind of worked on. So as I said, it's not only kind of giving you some kind of just some alerts, red alerts, or telling you how many exceptions that has happened. It's actually kind of help you to kind of get into some of the deeper insights of the problem that we have. Right. Move on. Perfect. So let's spend a couple of minutes, and then I have one more slide there. I'll quickly talk about in a little bit of how it works. So as we kind of moving on. So what I have explained you so far is primarily kind of a rule engine based approach, right? There, the catch is that we are, as I said, that in the process what we do, we kind of sit down with the internal audit team, or internal audit team internally, they kind of brainstorm and identify, and you have all the control gaps and so on. So controls identified. So from there we take a look into that, and we form all the rules. Now, question is, how am I going to identify a newer kind of a break, gap breach that happened? Like how I'm going to identify that, for which the rule is not defined, right? So if there is a question, how am I going to handle that part? So for that, what is happening? A newer kind of technologies are coming in, right? Newer kind of approaches are coming in. So there, the whole approach is that I may not have a rule engine in place. Rather, what I'll have is that a very, very, very intelligent, program. So a machine learning driven program, which basically learns over a number of years of data, that how are the various data patterns are working. So basically it identifies, it tries to recognize the patterns from the given scenario, okay, and from there it tries to kind of locate where the kind of some of the unusual events are happening, and that's what they report back. That's what kind of comes out as a solution. So this is not this is how many of the organizations are moving to that space, because the COVID kind of scenario has happening, and maybe like we are talking about COVID like on every occasion these days. But overall, even without COVID also, like the business dynamics is changing very fast. And every time, rule engine is a always a catch-up game. Like you see some kind of control which is happening, or some kind of challenges that is happening, then you form the control, and as you form the control, according the rule is written, and then your rule engine is able to kind of identify those transactions which are, or the entries which are not following that kind of control, right? So it's always a catch-up game. Rather, what we're talking of is that with the invent of the newer set of technologies, irrespective of these solutions can itself throw certain kind of unusual events which has not happened in past or before, but those are unusual because they are not following certain patterns, right? So it's kind of going through a lot of work has happened, and we're also kind of working with some of the kind of some of the live projects where this approach is being used. So here we're talking about some of the machine learning. I was talking about machine learning approaches. So basically, like in such solution, what happens? It's a statistical kind of a program which can learn on itself by looking into the data. Like it will learn over a period of time. So you feed certain data, 1 year data, it will learn some kind of a trends, and if you feed more data, it will learn about more accurate trends and so on. And as it goes on, like it will become more intelligent. The machine, the program will become more intelligent, right? Natural language processing is more like I talk about the text analysis, right? So that's something is basically like is very important. So what happens, like the rule engine based analysis that we're talking of, or the dashboard that we have, there you are kind of going to see a set of analysis which has been already designed. Now, if you really want to see certain kind of a different cut of analysis, for which like you can just type in English, and you get the result out of it. So those are kind of natural language processing kind of applications. And deep learning is also similarly kind of technologies like where you can actually that's a lot of application as far as fraud is concerned. And AI-based preventive action is similar to what machine learning driven solutions are there, where we can actually use the machine intelligence to identify some of the risk and so on, right? Moving to the next slide, I'll just quickly finish off in a minute because it talks about the some of the core technologies. Snehal, go to the next slide. Yeah. So here, sorry, like I really don't want to bog you down with a lot of technical part of it. So we are starting with the data part of it, and next is the data transformation and feature engineering, where we are basically like try to understand like hypothesis formation that I'm talking about. It goes a little beyond that and try to understand the patterns part of it. Then the machine learning algorithms, which are basically like looks into the various algorithms, statistical algorithm, and try to find those trends and patterns and so on, and it can do a lot of various analysis, like it's given some samples like sublet segmentation or value chain analysis and so on, and we can basically talk about a lot of audit analytics also, like which are possible. And then finally it throws the output in such a manner that you can really kind of find out where the problem is happening or where the kind of where the trend is, right? So with that said, I think I'd like to conclude. I know that I overshot the time by a few minutes. Sid, like back to you.
Oh, that's fine, Kaushik. I think it was much required and essential, because we used to talk about this analytics and advanced analytics, big data analysis. I think, as I mentioned on that particular slide where you were, that this is the present and this is going to be the future. The internal auditor's role was always there, but what needs to get done as part of the profile has always evolved and changed, and it is going to continue in that fashion. So I think it was important what you were mentioning, because if a bot is there, we cannot make bot responsible. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with people. So that's why people, process, and platform, all the three are important. And whatever advancement in terms of processes, whatever advancement in terms of platforms we may come up with, it's always the people which will be questioned, and that will continue to be. And there's nothing wrong in that, because the human mind is much more fertile than any bot, but because bot is made by the human mind. So is it the mind, or is it the bot? Which is ultimately the role of auditors is not going to get removed, definitely replaced for some jobs, some activity, not jobs but activities, and perhaps newer roles will also get well. So I will open for questions. I think Mehnaz, you are there. I can see Nikhil sir
Yes,
also.
sir.
I'm not sure Nikhil sir
Yes.
is there. Yeah, because we'll be
Yes,
really
so-
happy to hear words from him. But yeah, Mehnaz, if there are any questions, we are happy to take that before we call it.
Sure, sir. So what I'll do is I'll simply call out the name and give them the mics, because there are few lengthy questions and multiple questions from one individual. So it's better if I give them the mic. Yeah. So there is one from Mr. Vijay Raghavan R. So I'm just trying to unmute him. He can then communicate his question to you. I think he is not active. I'm not able to unmute him. There is one more
Have in
question.
the chat box also some questions, or that's fine.
Sure. So his question is, how can a statutory auditor get himself trained in analytics?
So,
Analytics. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, Sid. So, there are ways to do it, like, a very structured way of kind of make a plan to do, and it's not that you have to kind of get trained on every aspect of it. So because your strength is that function knowledge and so on top of it, what can be done is basically giving you a set of tools which is kind of can be can be learned by the auditor very quickly and very easily, and to a good extent, some analysis can be done using Excel also. Like Excel is quite a powerful tool, though I'm not kind of promoting Excel, but I'm just talking about it. So point is that you can yourself do this some of this analysis yourself by knowing the features of these tools. That's number one. Number two is that what are the solutions that I spoke about in my presentation. So these solutions are mostly automated, right? So there you really don't need to kind of get into too much of it, like creating the doing the data analysis. Like here the proposition is that you are not going to spend too much of time in terms of collecting data, writing rules and creating kind of an analysis. Rather, from an auditing point of view, it's important to get the analysis and understand the analysis, and accordingly you kind of can focus on your investigation part of it.
Right, sir.
Yeah.
So the next question we have here is, how much will auditing through the use of VR play, especially in the pandemic era when it becomes difficult to travel to the client's place?
Remote auditing, basically remote auditing. I think
Yeah.
there are certain checks which is not possible through a remote audit, but with my personal experience, I can say that we've done a lot of audits, different areas of audits remotely, and I think somewhere when the results were seen by us, is the new normal. Let me put it that way. And by the clients, the expectation of the clients has also been on similar lines, because this time is going to continue for long. I think remote audit will answer these things, and the usage of bots or the usage of advanced analytics plays a significant role in all of this. Cyber risk has to be managed. I think that is quite critical, but quite possible, quite likely. With my experience, I can say yes, it is doable. Whether even if you have a Tally or you have a SAP, Oracle, JD Edward, whichever, it's quite possible. Yeah.
Right. So there's a continuity to the same question where he asked, do internal auditors approach the entire internal audit process function in a different way than the pre-pandemic era? How much do you think it has changed?
Yes, it has changed. If you ask me, the existing SOPs, standard operating procedures, if on paper we want that, yes, they have been followed verbatim, perhaps that's fine. But with a reduced staff strength, with a offline working model, with not too much of digitization in many organizations, I think the reality is that there has been a compromise on controls, but whether that compromise has led to something really going wrong is the question that the internal auditor should look at, because that is what the ask and the expectation is. I think, and I did mention also that compromise has been specifically in areas of segregation of duty. Compromise has been on DOA. And there are compensating controls, there are detective controls. More importantly, the mega controls or the compensating controls that that the internal auditor in the era of this pandemic has to focus on. And I think the next question which might come on this, what I'm saying is that, is there some sort of a listing? No, there isn't. It's actually to sequentially study a complete flow of activities in a particular transaction and look at the endpoint control. But having said that, it is important to look at the criticality of risk and fraud risk, and those points need to be verified by the internal auditor. I think I may sound to be frankly quite generic, but when it comes to specifics, for instance, when I'm saying a fraud risk gets identified, one has to see that really has the control being compromised on those particular mitigation controls where fraud risk is there, is important at the same time.
So, next question is, do you suggest that the role of internal auditor should include assessing the resilience in business? And what are the key components of evaluating the resilience apart from the cash flows, working capital during pandemic times?
I think let us look at it this way. What do internal auditors see? At the end of the day, they see three things: the triple P, people, process, and which is called technology. Then we called it cyber. I would prefer to call it platform. So people, process, and platform. I think organizations, when we say organizations, it is actually the people part of it, process part of it, and the platform part of it, resilient to the changing or evolving external environment, which is getting influenced by all of these things. And we can actually pick up examples in all of these three areas. Extremely so. Cash flow, like we said, is one example only. It may be like an outcome of a particular process. But from a people point of view, a work from home, work from anywhere. Now, how is that concept making the productivity of the officials, at the peak or at the expectation levels? Let me put it that way. Is something that needs to be seen. I think what I have heard is that people have become more productive because the timeline of 8 hours perhaps somewhere has got again compromised, and we are working more like bots. That's the reality to some extent. So people is very important. Processes, I think it's a given that the operating procedures have definitely got compromised, but have they got compromised to the extent of compromise on an internal control environment, making it weaken, is the question that one needs to look at. Is the compromise on the procedures still making the organization resilient enough to avoid any sort of a fraud scenario, is something which the internal auditors have to look at. From a platform point of view, I would say the access to the platforms, which is whatever SAP or whichever Navision and whichever platform is there, Microsoft also. How much is it? How robust are the cyber controls around all of these areas effective, so that there is nothing which can, or to a large extent, let me not say nothing, but to a large extent, things are not getting, the control environment is not again weakened to any vulnerability of a fraud scenario getting created. So people, process, and platform, I think internal auditors have to look at the resilience of an organization from these 3 points of view.
Right, sir.
Yeah.
So please highlight what bot is used for review of post-sanction of the loans, specifically for the small banks and NBFCs.
Sorry, you said bot is used? Sorry, I didn't get that clear.
Yeah. So please highlight what BOT, so I read it as bot, is used for review of post-sanction of the loans, specifically for the small banks and NBFCs.
Dale, you want to pick that?
Yeah. So yes, the bot can be used to particularly carry out these kind of audits within the banks NBFC space. How it can be solution architectured is something that is from different environments and will be need to be customized. But just to give you a broad level architecture on the overall solution, based on the checklist, there will be qualitative and quantitative checks that need to be done for each of the loans that have been approved. These quantitative checks will either be in the form or the document submitted itself, or the documents already converted into an Excel tracker or a Word doc where the key information is already captured. Using this information, the bot can be used to map it with the checklist and throw up exceptions, whether, for example, the person's age is within this bracket, whether the turnover is correct, whether the overall net worth of the person is as that fits in the checklist. And all these checks from a quantitative and numeric point of view can be done, because it's eventually setting up the logics behind it. And once the logics are set, it throws up those exceptions always accurately based on those logics. And then you can come up to a conclusion whether the loan was correctly passed on to the person or no, based on those selective quantitative checks. So yes, to a good extent it is possible, and a solution needs to be built around the digital environment that the bank and BFC has. So of course that has to be customized from case to case.
Okay, sir. So would there be a threat, security threat, in case if the login credential is given to a bot? Is, after all, it's a machine and it would be susceptible to hacks and other technical issues.
Yeah, so I'll answer it in two ways. One, the bot is nothing but a software program which completely resides in the company's infrastructure. So anything which is within company's infrastructure, if X is hackable, then even Y is hackable. But what we understand is, because the infrastructure is quite strong, there is resilience and there are quite a lot of mechanisms around it, the bot cannot be compromised and there is absolute security. Also, these bots come with certain security certifications to give a lot of comfort to the users that hacking is not possible. Thirdly, the control of the bots is eventually with the administrator or the user, which is the human itself. So whatever coding, customization, and bot run the user is doing, the bot will only run the same way every time. It's like any other application. So if any other application can be compromised, even the bot can. So we are using thousands of applications, right? Nothing's generally compromised at all because of the fantastic security measures around it, from an infra point of view, from a product point of view, both.
Yeah, Snail. Menas, how many questions do we have? Because I actually have.
I think so. We have quite a few. So if you want, you can take them over email as well. So you
I
can
can
let
do
me know.
that, but maybe
Yeah,
some of the questions, if Cossack is there and Snail is there,
sure.
they can take that because I just need to
Yeah.
log in. I was on the call as well. So my
Thank
apologies,
you so
but
much,
you
sir.
send it in writing and we will answer all the queries in writing as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Surely, sir. So they can just let me know when they want me to stop. So if they want me to take quite a few questions right now.
Snail, you can go ahead and Cossack till what time, but
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
to step out for another call, which is already started. So thanks to all the
Sure.
participants for patiently listening to us. Yeah. And
Thank you
rest
so much,
assured,
sir.
once the questions are taken by Cossack and Snail, whatever balance is left, we are going to reply to them over an email.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we take the next question, sir. It is, what is the cost of the bot? Can middle-sized industries do the investment in and will it be helpful to them?
Yeah. So what I would say is that the bot. So there is one myth, overall, that the bot is a very expensive value proposition. But in terms of what it brings onto the table, the value addition that it does, and the way we utilize the bot for maximum amount of hours, and for those very specific activities where there is a lot of other resources being utilized, the ideal utilization is replacing a lot of resources with one resource, which is this bot, which is your digital worker. So that's how we put across the value proposition of a bot. What I understood was your question that from an industry perspective, how cost benefit it is, right? About so I
Right.
would say in any industry there is a shared service function, and there are core functions, and there are very niche functions. So shared service would be from an IT, payroll, FNA point of view, where there are good enough use cases of bots globally and in India. When we talk about core operations, it is from a, if it is not within the shared service, like a procurement could be out of the shared service, sales, inventory, manufacturing. So these are good areas where the bot can be utilized to do a lot of activities with good enough digitization on board for the company. And when we talk about niche areas, social media, pharmacovigilance in pharma, these are certain areas where again bot can be used for very niche activities, which can give you a lot of results, which can benefit from, for example, I'll talk about social media. So turnaround time for resolving one query can impact the company's reputation to a large extent. So this is where the bot brings in immense value, which is not quantifiable to an extent, but reputation, I mean, priceless, right? So that's how we can put in the proposition for the bot from a value point of view.
Right, sir. Can bots be used to access the reports and data from all softwares, or it is only limited to SAP?
Yes, that's a good question. So I'll use the word interface. So what does is doesn't integrate with an API. It interfaces, uses the user ID and password. So by using this, bot can access uh, all the platforms more or less. It's platform agnostic, and get into the system, pull out the data, and as demonstrated in the POC, maneuver over the data, get it cleaned, and get it ready for your next steps, maybe reporting, maybe analytics, or whatever. So yes, the bot can access more or less all systems, ERPs.
Okay, for
We've done it
RPA,
even on Tally.
are there any off-the-shelf applications used? Can you please name a few?
So for RPA, mainly it's robotic bots that we are talking about. But what happens is the bots can be very well integrated with a lot of other technologies. Could be emerging technologies. It could be existing technologies. So I'll give you an example of, say, analytical tools, Tableau, R. So these are certain tools where the bot can integrate and run the show on real-time basis with their particular coding. So this is possible. A second example that we could say is from an emerging technology point of view is that social distancing and contact tracing tools which are there in the market. Now these tools do capture two people come near each other and there is an alert sent. But how to convert that particular alert into an email or a message, and then built in the library at the back and do certain testing around that to monitor whether controls are working effectively or no. We can have a hybrid solution. So tech convergence is what we call it, which is more of a hybrid model of robotics, which is bots and any other existing technology. So that's the beauty of bot, that it interfaces with all systems, and it can work together with almost all the applications.
What are the major skills that an internal auditor would require after 5 to 6 years?
I think we could park this question for
Sure.
Sid to answer, because it is from an
Sure.
purely internal audit point of view, not from a technology
Right.
point of view. So
Okay.
Hi,
Sure, sir.
hi everyone. Kaushik here. I need to drop off because I have another commitment to join. So another call. So maybe if there any question comes up later on the analytics point, I can always respond to email.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, so
Yeah.
even I'll have
Would you-
last 5 minutes, so we can wrap up a few questions around robotics in next
Yeah,
5
sure.
minutes if possible. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. So there is one more question. Which tool is best for data analytics? Whether Excel is okay? Should I go for ClickView, etc., or any other options you may have?
Okay, again, so the analytics leader has just moved out of the call, but based on my experience, yes, Click is also one of the good tools that are being used in the market, with a lot of which a lot of our clients are using. So yes, Click is something which is being used by clients.
Okay, so I'll take this last question, which is what RPA tools are you using?
So there are two. So there are a lot of OEMs in the market, but with good history, experience, good know-how of the industry, and a lot of tech savvy and innovative products that keep coming in the market on frequent basis with a lot of upgrades. Automation Anywhere is one of our partners that we work pretty closely with, and also UiPath is one of them. So there are a little bit of differences between the products that they have, but yes, and I've also mentioned during my presentation that, like for example, Automation Anywhere has a bot which has an OCR capability, and it's an intelligent bot. So that's how they keep innovating, the OEMs, and yes, we work very closely with a few of them, and Automation Anywhere is being one of them.
Okay, sir. So I think we can just wind up with the questions now,
Sure.
and in case there are any further questions, I'll just email you the list of questions so that you can reply to me on email. And I will
Sure.
also on behalf of IA and all the participants for being with us and sharing so much of knowledge. Thank you so much, sir.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, participants. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. So we log off for the day. Good day.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Same to you.